My father was a gardener. In fact, he still is. I still remember when I planted my first garden. It was quite a joke. I think I got one potato out of it, about the size of a golf ball. Since then, I've expanded my knowledge and my experience in gardening. And I love growing a little garden in my backyard every year. And I always grow more than I can eat, even more than I can give away. But when I get my seeds each year, peppers, watermelons, radishes, different things, I look at the back of the packet and it'll say days to harvest. And it ranges from radishes at 25 to watermelons, 85 days, sometimes even 95 or 100 days. James uses the example of a farmer in James chapter 5 to teach us a lesson on patience. The title of the lesson is Patience Procures Pity. Listen as I read an interpretation of James chapter 5, verse 7 through 11. Here's what James says. He says, "So, dear brothers and sisters, be patient as you wait for the Lord to come back." You're going to hear him refer to the coming of the Lord 3 times in this passage. The first time here, it's just very general. Be patient as you wait for the Lord to come back. Of course, he wrote this almost 2,000 years ago. Then he begins to give a lot of examples of patience. He really gives 4 of them here. The first one, he says, look, a farmer waits for the land to yield a valuable crop, and he or she has to have a lot of patience as he or she waits for it until they receive, or until the farmer receives a season of rain. In other words, especially in the place where James lived, the farmer might plant the seeds and the ground is dry, but he puts the seeds out there anticipating a season of rain, and then the rain comes and the seeds, of course, germinate and they spring forth, and there's fertilization and all kinds of things, and you wait and wait and wait, and eventually the plant produces something that can be harvested. He says, in the same way, just like a farmer has to wait, you must also be patient. Now, he doesn't just say, wait, 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 and then finally you've waited long enough so you can stop being patient. No, you got to wait all the way to the end. If you wait 80 days for an 85-day harvest, then you go pick the watermelon and it's green because you lost patience at the end, then all your former patience didn't amount to anything at all. So he says, keep your hearts firm. Trust God as you wait for his coming, because the coming of the Lord is getting closer. So in verse 5, he said, wait for the Lord to come back. Now he says, the coming of the Lord is getting closer. He says, dear brothers and sisters, don't hold grudges against each other. Isn't that interesting? It's like you're either being patient or you're holding grudges against your fellow Christians. If I'm not patient, it's going to be evidenced in my viewpoint towards other believers. This is something I struggle with. As I was coming here this morning, preparing to give this lesson, I could think of 4 examples of people who've hurt me in the past, and it still hurts to this day, and I can't say that I always feel very forgiving towards these people, even though some of them, it's been many, many years since I was hurt. But James says, be faithful, forgive, love, be patient, because the coming of the Lord is getting closer. He says, if you do hold a grudge against another brother or sister, you will be in trouble for it, because you can see that the judge is standing at the door. That's the 3rd time he's referred to the coming of Christ. And each time he makes it look like there's greater urgency. And the closer the time of Christ's coming gets, the more important it is to be patient. So we got the Lord is coming back, it's getting closer. Now he says the judge is standing at the door. It's almost like James says, you better be patient, because Jesus is just right on the other side of that door. He can hear everything you're saying. He can see everything you're doing. And if you're holding a grudge against your brother or your sister, When you have been forgiven, what are you going to feel like when the judge steps to the door and catches you red-handed with your guilt? He says in verse 10, you are my siblings. Remember, James is written to Messianic Jews, so they're his siblings in more way than one. And he says, consider the prophets. So he said, consider the farmer. Now he says, consider the prophets who have spoken to us in the name of the Lord. Consider them as an example of patiently suffering hardships. I don't have time to go through all the prophets, but think of Noah, how long he preached and waited for the fulfillment of God's promise. Think of Enoch. He prophesied, the Lord is coming with his saints to execute judgment. How long ago did Enoch prophesy that? Oh, about 5,000 years ago. And he didn't get to see the fulfillment of the promise. In fact, we read in Hebrews that all the old prophets preached about the coming of the Messiah, and they didn't get to see it happen. Abraham died in faith, still having not received the promise. So he says, don't hold grudges against God or against others, because you have an example of the prophets to follow. Be like them. And he may be expanding on that example in verse 11, or he may be giving another one. I'm not actually sure. He says, listen carefully. We consider those who faithfully endure in hard times to be blessed, happy even. Think of an athlete who has to go through great difficulty, or has to endure a lot of pain, or has to really make a sacrifice in order to win a victory. And we admire them, not just because they won, but because of what they went through to win, right? He says it's the same for you. It's no different for you. You say, man, he's a champion. Look what he went through to achieve that goal. But then when you start going through something that's hard, you don't want to go through it. So you consider him to be a great winner, but you don't want to be a winner. He said, it doesn't work that way. You need to endure. You've heard of Job's great patience. This is the second or third or fourth example in the passage. Job's great patience is something we're familiar with. He says, and we know that the Lord had a purpose and an outcome in mind in Job's situation. None of us doubt that. We look at the story of Job and we're like, man, I see the hand of God in that. Well, the same God who had his hand in Job's life has his hand in your life and in my life. So we're glad to read about Job's patience, but how about ours? And by the way, Job was waiting for the coming of the Lord. He said, though the skin worms destroy my body, yet I know that in my flesh I will see my Redeemer for myself with these eyes. Job had patience. And then he concludes. Remember, the title of the lesson is Patience Procures Pity. I want God to look at me and say, I can bless you because you trust me and you're being patient and you're enduring the things that I'm calling upon you to endure. Well, this is the punchline of the passage. God is full of pity and compassion, and he is a God who is rich in tender mercy. But who does he have pity on? Who does he have compassion on? Who does he show his tenderness and his mercy to? Except to his children who patiently endure. We're in the middle of this COVID-19 crisis. Talking about patience. I read an article this morning that said the Maryland education director, whatever her title is now preparing for kids to be homeschooled in the fall. I thought I was going to fall out of my seat. This to me has become a symbol of patience. Probably a symbol for a lot of things. But man, how long is this going to last? How long is the church going to have to do what we're doing? How long are those who are out of work going to have to do it? Ultimately, all these things don't even matter. We're supposed to be looking for the coming of Christ. And none of us have had to endure as long or as much as the prophets or as Job. Just be patient. When you get anxious, when you get frustrated, don't take it out on the believers around you. I've done it. I did it yesterday. But there's no excuse. We are to be patient and simply look for the Lord to come back every morning, praying, even so, come quickly, Lord Jesus. Not just so we don't have to put up with trouble anymore, but so that we can stand before God and hear, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Be patient. It will procure pity from God for you.